Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Pastor Becca. I'm so happy to bring you this message this morning. So, for us around the Pacific Northwest, school is starting up. And for my three kids, I've got all of them going to high school. Can you believe it? I have a senior, he's turning 18 tomorrow. And then my twins are starting their freshman year. And I can't believe it, and it's left me with kind of a sigh of relief that we made it through the dreaded middle school years. I don't know about you, but my middle school years were brutal. They were brutal for me in a lot of ways, but for one, I was super insecure about just the way I looked. I had these gangly long legs. I think I donned a really terrible perm for a lot of those years. And then I had my teeth were buck teeth. They were all over the place. This was before I was able to have braces. And I remember most of my days, if I ever needed to speak or open my mouth, I always hid my teeth, kind of like this. I'd always hide my face because I was just so embarrassed about what I looked like. But I also remember having this feeling of really wanting a boyfriend. I don't know why I felt like I needed a boyfriend when I was in middle school, but I did. And I had the hots for one particular boy. And I remember telling my friend that I thought he was cute, and then my friend told her friend, and then her friend told his friend, and then his friend told him. And then I knew that he knew, and that hot embarrassment came over me, but also that excitement that, like, maybe this might work out, and it could be like the man of my dreams, and we could get married. And I don't know, your imagination takes over. Well, the next day, he sees me in the hall, and my heart starts to flutter, and he just looked at me, and he was with his friends, and he pointed, and he laughed at me. And he said, "Why would you think that I would want to be with an ugly, buck-toothed girl like you?" I was crushed. I was crushed that he saw that thing in me that I felt like was so ugly. I felt so rejected. I felt so unworthy. I could not wait to get home and to cry in the arms of my mom, the one person that I felt like I belonged with, that I could be 100% myself with. Hey, church, today we're going to be talking about a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. It's been something that I've done quite a lot of work with myself over the last few years, and I'm hoping that this small presentation of that will spark an interest in you. One of the things we're going to look at is not only the life of Jesus, who lived this principle out so beautifully, but we're also going to be using a book that I have found so helpful. It's a book called The Gifts of Imperfection. It's by Brené Brown. It's a very small book, but it is packed full of really great wisdom. So as you're listening to this message, I would just implore you to check that out, get it from Amazon, and use it as a tool as we discover and uncover the beautiful gift that God gave all of us, and that is this need to belong, a deep need inside of all of us to feel like we belong. Now, belonging is an interesting thing. It's this time when you know that you are meant to be here and that you contribute. And it's this beautiful place where you just feel like you can be your authentic self and that you matter. And when you feel it, you know how special it is. But unfortunately, as we are going on that journey of trying to figure out how we belong in this world, we stumble and fumble our way through those. And I'll tell you, those middle school years, those awkward in-between years, those are the worst for trying to get to this core desire of feeling like we belong. And one of the ways that we do this is by trying to fit in. Now, for a long time, I thought that fitting in and belonging were kind of synonymous with one another. They were the same thing. But through Brené's research, I realized that not only are they not the same thing, but they're actually opposed to one another. Because fitting in is this idea where you assess a group or you assess a person, and your mind starts to develop a way that you need to change, almost be like a chameleon, so that you can fit in with that group. And fitting in kind of has that like a sound to that phrase that is kind of like it's jarring, it's forceful. And oftentimes, fitting in can often be a barrier to you actually belonging to a group. And here's what I mean by that. When you are trying to fit in, or you've assessed and you've changed, and all of a sudden you like things that you don't really like, or you do your hair a way that you normally wouldn't do your hair, you're changing yourself to fit into a group. You're not living truthfully, you're actually living a lie. And so what you're presenting to this group is a lie, and any kind of feedback or affection that you're getting from this group, it feels like a big fat lie. And it feels like a big performance. And it is a lot of work and a lot of energy to keep up with that kind of a facade. And Jesus wants better for us. Jesus actually designed us to live fully in ourselves. We are beautifully made. We are his masterpiece. And so today, what I want to do is I want to look at just a simple definition that we can all come together with of what belonging means. So let's look at this. This is from Brené Brown. This is what she has to say about belonging. Belonging, it's the innate human desire to be part of something larger than us. True belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Doesn't that sound refreshing and it's like something that we want more of? So I want to dive into the scriptures here a little bit because I'm so inspired by the way that Jesus lived this way. He lived as his authentic self, and he also accepted people as their authentic self. And so let's look at a passage of scripture that comes from Luke 19. And if you've been around church for very long, you're probably familiar with the story of Zacchaeus. And if you've been around church as long as I have, you might have a little song playing in your head about Zacchaeus was a wee little man. You know that song? You might have that started in your head, so I apologize for that if that's going to be following you around this week. But we're going to be looking at Zacchaeus. So let's just start together. Who was Zacchaeus, and what is this story all about? So let's read this together. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. I want to stop right there because I've got to give you some cultural context here of what a tax collector would look like in Israel in the first century. Roman had come and occupied the land, and they were even hiring Jewish people to come and collect the taxes of the Jewish people to actually fund the Roman army, to fund the Roman government. And a lot of times, most times, the tax collectors were seen as traitors because not only were they collecting money for the enemy, they were skimming a little bit off the top or charging a little bit more from their fellow countrymen to put in their pockets. And so you can kind of get this picture of who Zacchaeus was, that not only is he a tax collector, but he's the chief tax collector. So he's doing such a good job that he's getting a promotion here in this area. And it also says he's wealthy. And the only way he is going to be wealthy is if he is skimming a lot off the top of these taxes from his own people. So I just want you to have this in your mind. And this brought up a really valuable point that I've seen in my own life and maybe you can relate to as well. And I want you to write this down if you're journaling today, but sometimes we compromise our integrity when we feel like we don't belong. Sometimes we compromise our integrity when we feel like we don't belong. So here's this man caught in this culture that is very divided, and he's smack dab in the middle of that division. His Jewish countrymen probably despise him, and he's working for a Roman government that despises him. And I can imagine that Zacchaeus does not feel like he belongs anywhere. Let's keep reading in this story here. It says this: he wanted to see Jesus. He wanted to see who Jesus was. But because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. I want to stop right here. This is such an interesting tidbit of information that Luke gives us here in his gospel. He's short-statured. We don't see very many physical descriptions of people in Scripture, so when we do, we need to pay attention. What did this mean? Well, I think this is another strike against him, honestly. I think in this culture and in this time, his short stature made it even another thing, a physical thing that kept him from feeling like he belonged. And I'm telling you, this one stabbed me in the heart too, because I understand what it feels like to have a physical thing that you feel like you desperately wish you could change so that you could feel like you could belong. And I wonder if Zacchaeus felt this as well. So he's short-statured. He's the chief tax collector. He's very wealthy. He wants to meet Jesus. And let's keep reading, hear what happens. So he ran ahead of the crowd, and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. I'll stop the story again here really quick because I think this is so interesting too. This is a wealthy professional man who's climbing a tree. How undignified is that? I started imagining like what this might mean for this man who's so willing to get up in a tree. And for one reason, Scripture's pretty clear. He's doing it because he's short. He wants a good view. But I have to imagine if he was in good stature with his fellow countrymen, they probably would have let him ahead to the front of the crowd. But instead, he felt like he had to hide in a tree. He felt like he was safer or even felt more comfortable in his own skin if he was hidden instead of right there with his own peers. This led me to think about the times in my life when I don't feel like I belong. And maybe you can relate to this too, but here's another point you can journal or write down, that sometimes we isolate when we feel like we don't belong. You feel like that? I certainly have in my life. Let's keep looking at this beautiful interaction now that's about to happen with Jesus and Zacchaeus. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and he said to him, Zacchaeus. I have to stop right there. Jesus says his name. And to me, there's something so powerful and beautiful about that simple interaction of this famous teacher making eye contact and noticing this man that's hidden up in the trees and saying his name. And I couldn't help but wonder, when was the last time Zacchaeus ever heard his name being spoken? Because I can imagine that his fellow countrymen, his peers, called him lots of names. I can imagine that they called him a cheater, and they called him a shrimp, and maybe a traitor even. He was called lots of names, but when was the last time he heard somebody say his name, the name that his mama gave him? Names are such an interesting thing. I have such a fond memory of raising my babies here in this church. And one of my best memories was taking my littles to Sunday school and having them in the nursery and participating in worship. But my favorite part was going up to the hall with all the other parents, this big crowd of parents, and each of us kind of bottlenecked in the doorway, and scanning that little room with all those little people and locking eyes on my kid and them locking eyes on me and them saying, "Mommy!" and running to me and jumping into my arms like we hadn't seen each other in years. There's just something so endearing about being seen and being called out for your uniqueness in somebody's life and for your kid to call you mommy. I mean, it just melts me. So that's where my imagination took me when I heard Jesus calling out Zacchaeus' name. All right, sorry for that tangent. Let's get back to the text here. So Jesus looked up and he said, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must," and I love that, "I must stay at your house today." And so he came down at once, and he welcomed him gladly. Oh my gosh. Can you just picture this scene and what it must have meant for Zacchaeus' heart? Let's keep reading here. At that time, all the people saw this, and they began to mutter. This isn't the first time that we see people muttering in scriptures. It's certainly not the last, and certainly we know what it sounds like to hear people muttering. But here's what they're muttering about. "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." They're so offended by who Jesus is including in his life and where he's going to eat dinner. These people are actually offended by it. So they're muttering to themselves about it. I can just hear that and I can feel it. And scripture then continues the story. Let's hear what it says. It says, "But Zacchaeus stood up and he said to the Lord, 'Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount.'" And then let's read on. Jesus says this. Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." This is such a really beautiful beautiful interaction. I'm telling you, if Jesus were to pull me down from a tree and tell me that he wanted to come over to my house, you can bet your bottom dollar I'd be pulling out my iPhone and texting my kids and just being like, "Quick, Jesus is on his way. Clean everything. This is not a drill." Like, can you imagine like Jesus coming to your house and what a thrilling invitation that is. But more than that, this interaction with Zacchaeus, that he was seen, and that maybe for the first time in his life, he was encountering that true belonging that we're talking about, where he got to be himself. And there were some parts of his life that he wasn't proud of. But Jesus was able to just like name it and claim it. And he was able to look at himself clearly and authentically for the very first time, and something really changed. Something changed in Zacchaeus in that moment, in that instant moment. He was able to make a real effort all of a sudden in seeing himself clearly for the first time. And I think when you see the masterpiece that Jesus has really made in us clearly for the first time, you want to live into that masterpiece. You want to fulfill that. It's something that happens because you feel like you belong. And when you belong with someone like Jesus, and when he sees all of you, and he still wants to come to your house and eat your food and be at your table, it is so beautiful. I want you to write down this point here as we're going along this journey together, that when we feel true belonging, we can start to heal what is broken in us and in our relationships. And we see this beautiful story lived out in Zacchaeus. I have no idea how the story ends as far as what does Zacchaeus' relationships look like beyond this encounter with Jesus. But I can only imagine that somebody who humbly is trying to restore their relationships because they're taking ownership of their own story and their own stuff, man, your heart softens towards them. I have great hope, and I hope to meet him in heaven and ask how this story ends, but I have great hope that his relationships turned into something authentic, and he had belonging in his community again. So church here, I want to start with this. This is such a beautiful story that's so inspiring to me to work on that part of myself and to acknowledge this belonging that I have inside of me and what I'm going to do with it. And if you're struggling with this, or you're looking at some of your relationships or some of your groups, and you're realizing that there's some authenticity there, there's some times when you just feel like you're wearing a mask all the time, that you're not even sure who you are anymore. I want to say this to you, that a great place to start is with Jesus. Jesus looks the most like God that we've ever seen. He says that about himself. If you want to know what God is like, look to me. And from the beginning of Scripture, from the beginning of time, we see a God who has been pursuing us. He created us for a relationship with him. And when that got so broken and distant, he sent down Jesus to actually have that physical relationship, model what it's supposed to look like. And we can access that today. We see it all through Scripture, Jesus pursuing people, the woman at the well, the lepers that have been pushed out because of their leprosy, their disease, pushed out of society, not belonging, can't even try to fit in. He goes to them. He goes to the outcasts. He goes to the Samaritan. You see this time and time again, where he is the first one to show up. He's the first one to say, I see you. I want to be a safe place where you can belong. And together, we're going to change from the inside out. It's a really beautiful story. And if you've been taught something different about Jesus, that you need to clean yourself up first, or maybe you need to know the Scriptures more, or maybe you feel like I just got to get this drinking under control, or whatever it is that you feel like you need to do first before Jesus will make you feel like you belong with him, boy, I want to wipe that away from you. Because the evidence is, and the reality is, what I've experienced, what we see through Scripture, is that Jesus is right there, ready to see you for who you are right now. There's nothing you have to do first and foremost. The first and foremost is that Jesus wants to say, you belong with me. This is a great place to start. And it's a great place for you to discover who you really are underneath all the things that you're masking with, all the things that are covering up who you truly were created to be. And the divine place to do that is even just with prayer. You don't have to be fancy about it. It can come out as mumbling and fumbling. But Jesus is so honored and so pleased when you can be honest with him in that space. That's a beautiful place to start. And next, I just want to say that this place, Court Street, is also a place where we welcome you to come just as you are. You don't have to do anything fancy. You don't have to wear fancy clothes. You don't need to know certain scriptures or have a secret knock at the door. This is a place where you come and we welcome you and you belong just as you are. If you don't have a church family like that, I welcome you. If you are not local to this place, I just urge you to find a place like that. Find a place where you can belong in community. I'll tell you what starts to happen. There starts to be a domino effect in your life once you realize that you can have that with Christ first and foremost. You can have it in community in a healthy church. The other thing you can start to do is start looking for it out in community, out with your neighbors, with your work people, practicing being exactly who you are and finding those people that you are safe with. It is possible. It does take work sometimes, but it is possible. And then here we're going to end with this, because once that is achieved, this is the challenge. This is where it starts to all come together. Because when I feel true belonging, I can be a place where others feel true belonging. I just want you to imagine this for a second. I want you to imagine that you are in a place where you can accept wherever anybody is at, whatever somebody comes to offer you. You can even see behind some of the makeup and some of the maybe falsehoods and some of the hang-ups and the habits that someone might have, and you can zero past those things, see the image of God in somebody, and be a really safe place for someone to be their authentic, true self, and that in your presence, they can feel belonging. It's possible. It's possible. Church, I love to just pray for you. I'd love for us to just have this be a springboard of a conversation. I'd love for you to get that book from Brene. I'd love for you to discover through the scriptures where you see Jesus pursuing people, where you see Jesus living out his true self and being okay with it, and where you see him interacting with others and calling out their true self and being a place where of true belonging. It's an exciting adventure. And so what I'd like to do right now is just have you engage in prayer with me right now as we just say a blessing over this time and over the message you just heard. And it's my prayer that it just continues to minister to your heart all throughout the week. So let's pray together. God, I love this line in 1 John that says that we love because he first loved. It's the order that is correct. We felt this love, this undeniable love and acceptance from you, and there's an outpouring of that is possible. And that through that outpouring, it's what's changing this world. It's what's bringing your kingdom. And I'm so blessed to be part of it. So, Lord, my simple prayer is this, is that we can become a people that sees the masterpiece that you've created in all of us, and that we can really feel good about who I am and stand tall and firm in that. That doesn't mean we're perfect. We're still working out our imperfections, but we can even bring our imperfections out in the light and be really vulnerable and honest with what we're working on. And then, Lord, I just ask that we can be a place where people can come as they are, and that we can be a place where we see the image of God in them, and that we delight in the masterpiece that is before us. And then, Lord, this is all possible just because of who you are. God, you are a God that has pursued us from the beginning of time. And it's so beautiful to see our little world and your big world collide once again. It's life-changing, and it's such a beautiful miracle to be part of. God, be with us on this journey. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right, church, we'll see you next time.